All right, I do believe we are live. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Break the Rules stream. I am your humble host, Lev Polyakov at LevPo on Twitter. Giovanni Pennacchietti in the house, as always, the great Geo. And we have a great guest for you tonight, David Reaboi, senior fellow at the Claremont Institute, and brilliant writer. He wrote this book, Qatar Shadow War, which I have right over here. I highly recommend for everybody to get this book. It is an incredibly short read. It took me one afternoon to read the entire thing, and I highly recommend it. But starting out first, again, you people subscribe, yada yada, Patreon. But I want to first find out about the gains that David has experienced and why did this come about. Like, okay, I know we're going to talk about like why you got into journalism and your writing and all that. And by the way, please follow his Substack as well, which I'm going to link. But first, I want to find out about the gains, about the muscles. How did this happen?
Are you asking if he's natty, Lev? Is that what you're trying to do?
So yeah, I mean, it's I guess I've been working out pretty seriously since 2011. And it was really only that, I mean, I had my gym part squared away, but I was shit on nutrition. I just didn't I sort of took it half seriously. Look, when I got to the gym, I was good to go. But once I left, I just wasn't, I didn't put it all together. And it was something that I had wanted to do for a long time. I moved to Texas and blah, blah, blah. You get engaged and you're, moving around and working a lot and this and that. And, you fall away from it. But I decided when I moved to Florida in, I guess, May of 2019, that I was going to go really seriously. And that's just, kind of what I've been doing. And the big thing was I figured out how to eat, or I figured out what to eat and what not to eat. And it's been good. And it's actually a lot easier. Like once a few months passes, it's so much easier to figure out a kind of sustainable thing. And, it's just what I'm doing.
I don't want to devote the entire episode to this, but I am curious what not to eat and what to eat for you personally.
Oh, well, part of it is, I mean, it's really important, actually, honestly, is to go get your blood work done and see a doctor, because especially if you're like, you're of Ashkenazi extraction, you probably have all kinds of thyroid nonsense. You probably got all kinds of like sensitivity to gluten. You've got sensitivity to lactose, all of this medical bullshit. And those are really the first things that you should take care of. Don't eat that stuff. And when I stopped eating it, I stopped drinking, blah, 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 all this stuff. And I felt better. I felt better. I looked better. The other thing too is obviously, having a handle on how much and what kind of carbs you're eating is a huge one. But I would say step one is, make sure you get your blood work done and see about any allergies. Maybe you're eating food that is just fucking you up in many ways and you don't even know. So that's what I would do first. It's totally neglected. People don't even think about it. They'll put so much effort into coming up with a new program for themselves and all this stuff. And, the big thing, for example, gluten, the big thing is staring them right in the face, and they're not doing it. So they're missing out on gains. They're not operating at their, full potential.
Well, one thing, just real quick for myself, I am at the point right now where I do drink dairy, but the dairy that I drink is raw. One of my favorites is raw buffalo milk. And I noticed that the buffalo milk, it goes down really easy. I don't really have any problems. And again, maybe like without it, it would be even better, but it just tastes really, really good. You know what I mean? Like, I can live without the bread, I can live without the pasta, but as far as just the pure, let's say, kundalini energy or whatever you want to call it, of the raw milk, it's like you're drinking pure energy. I don't know how to describe it, but let's see what happens. I have faith in I have faith in various discoveries we're going to make along the way. If all of our cells end up regenerating every, 7 years, we end up being a completely new person except for the black of our eyes, then maybe there is hope to undo some of these generational problems that have afflicted people for a long time, as far as some people can eat this, some people cannot eat this. But either way, let's get off this for a sec, and let's go to Qatar.
Thank God I'm Mediterranean. Okay. The carbs are a biggest issue with me. It's yeah.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, giving up pizza was the hardest. Pizza and bagels. It was the hardest. And but then you cut back slowly, and there's stuff that you can replace it with. I mean, there's for example, there's gluten-free stuff that you can
cauliflower
replace
bread.
with. Yeah, I mean, cauliflower pizza is terrible. I've never had one I've never had a cauliflower pizza that's half as good as the worst regular pizza I've ever had.
Here in Canada, we have Pizza. Theirs comes surprisingly close. I can't believe it. Yeah, it's interesting. But you're right. I mean, I think it's like the type of carbs that you're ingesting. Like for example, with bread, I'm trying to stick to more like rye, sprouted grain, stuff like that, but the bread, especially with the Italian diet, is it's terrible.
Yeah, it's hard though, to be honest. Like if you replace most of your bad carbs with like sweet potatoes and rice. Sweet potatoes, rice, oatmeal.
I mean, those are still carbs. Those are still gonna add a bit of the
Yeah, but I mean, for energy, you need them. I mean, if you want to go and you're trying to drop a lot of weight, that's a different story. But I mean, I'm not a nutritionist. All I know is what works for me. So
well, I mean,
like,
you're
neither financial advice nor nutritional advice.
Well, you're definitely in amazing shape from what I was able to see. You're like a brick house.
You remind me of Batista, his first run in the WWE. For some reason, I don't know why, but
I've got a dimple.
Yeah, that's
so
when he was in OVW as Leviathan. Anyways, yeah, Love, about his background. I'm curious.
Yes. Yeah. So when it comes to your particular interest in Qatar, but even in general, your interest in political, manipulation, all this kind of very, very engaging stuff that you wrote about in your book, things that I was always thinking about. What prompted that interest in the first place?
Right. Well, I mean, I don't really care that much about Qatar as Qatar. I got interested in the subject through a long study, many years of the Muslim Brotherhood, and a real interest in the Muslim Brotherhood, which started probably started around the time, or maybe a little before the time that Lawrence Wright did the Looming Tower, and which kind of for a lot of people it wasn't a scholarly book; it was kind of like popular, but it was still interesting. It has some flaws, but in terms of a narrative, it was good. And he talked a lot about the development of the Brotherhood, which got me thinking and got me curious. And within the Brotherhood, I found a massive, group of really serious people. These people run think tanks. These people have, they put out books. They think deeply about the things that they deal with and about strategy. And it's kind of fascinating. Here is a group that is, that often has to work kind of as a secret ideological society. And, they have debates amongst themselves. And obviously, I mean, I believe that they are a threat to the United States and the West and our allies, et cetera, and our kind of civilization more broadly. But I got really interested in them as you would any, worthy foe. And Qatar ends up being one of the kind of key outposts where the Brotherhood settled, and they managed not to get kicked out. It's one of the only places in the Muslim world today that they managed to not get kicked out of. And in fact, the Qatari government sponsors them to a really great extent. So that was my interest in Qatar. That's why I wanted to put that together. So within that story, you've got the Brotherhood story of the ideological side meeting the petrodollar side, and you've got a very tiny population with with bottomless resources, and frankly a lot of media savvy and public relations savvy, it's kind of a serious thing. So I thought that I spent the last couple of years talking about Qatar as it relates to this, and specifically as it relates to what I was calling the new Middle East that emerged after the sort of during and after the Obama administration as a response to Obama. And so I did that for a while, and the book was sort of like a bookend of my time thinking about these things.
I wanted to ask you, maybe later on we can get into how the Obama administration specifically targeted the Middle East and how the response was crafted. I mean, someone in the chat, by the way, please, my friend, do not read the chat, whatever you do, just ignore it. But someone mentioned the Arab Spring, but I wanted to ask specifically about.
See, now you can't say shit like that, because now I'm going to go and I'm going to want to look.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
Well, what's interesting about this Bruce Bogtrotter question here, Qatar's incestuous relationship with the U.S. military-industrial complex. This is something you mentioned in your book, where the United States has a base over there, and they give them lots of goodies. So it's very difficult for the American military to kind of back off and go away. You mentioned perhaps in the future making some kind of a deal with the Emirates to have a base there instead of in Qatar. But right now, would you say they've got our balls in a vice, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I kind of despair, because there's not really a good answer. You just float the idea of moving the base from Qatar to the Emirates, for example, and all hell breaks loose. They don't even take it seriously. And because it's just such a logistical nightmare on one hand, I mean, it really is. But on the other hand, it's the fact that, the Qataris have spent the last almost, just about 20 years, in close cooperation with the U.S. military. So, I mean, I think at this point, yeah, they've got us in a vice grip. They've got us over a barrel.
To play devil's advocate, one could say that the U.S. has enough smart, wise people, maybe not on the political end, but at least on the end of a lot of people that make military-related decisions.
Oh, that's questionable, Lev.
Well, hold on. I'm being devil's advocate for a reason.
Yeah.
Where they would make the decision to keep this base because it's more favorable for them to do so than it would be to reject the relationship, where they're getting something, quite substantial from this relationship and having this base. Or is it a matter of people filling their own pockets as these military professionals, perpetuating the military-industrial complex to that end, and nothing, it could have been done in a different way?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the latter. I mean, I'm trying to think of what the Qataris give to, what the Qataris give to the United States that couldn't also or better be supplied by other allies in the region. I mean, the first one that comes to mind are the Emiratis. And I can't think of one. The history of Qatar, as I wrote in the book, the history of Qatar is to it's a tiny little country. It's 90% comprised. The population is 90% comprised of foreign laborers. So it's who are anywhere from like modern day slaves to folks that from Europe and the United States and other places who are living in the country, who are making a great living, but still have no say in what happens in the country. So you've got that, and it's, I mean, in many ways, it's always been that way. It's always been a small country, so it's survived through alliances, two kinds of alliances: military alliances and ideological alliances. So the first ideological alliance was traditionally was with the Wahhabis. This goes back, about a century. And then that Wahhabi alliance sort of flipped over into the Brotherhood. Now they're still kind of, in terms of lineage, Wahhabis, but they're more ideologically Brotherhood oriented now. And as far as the military alliance goes, they used to be allied to the English, and they flipped over to the Americans. And for a tiny country, it kind of makes this dynamic kind of makes sense. It's a familiar one, but it's still worth accepting what's happening. It's still worth recognizing what's going on.
I wanted to ask you specifically about the Brotherhood, and this may seem controversial because I recognize that as myself as a Christian, that the horrendous abuses of Christians in the Middle East, the Coptics come to mind. But I do, let me paraphrase it by saying that I remember back in the early 2000s, especially here in Canada, you have like the rebel media people that talk about these shadowy ties to the Muslim Brotherhood in these various universities, and I believe certain Obama administration officials, and you had this sort of like Ezra Levant, the neocon sort of like Mark Stein-esque demonization of, the Muslim Brotherhood. But I think that, now that I'm a bit older, I think that in some ways you can't help but admire their ability to fund alternative institutions that have rivaled that of like the Western sort of Anglo-American power apparatus, and that I almost take the same approach that Hulbeck has, where he's saying, well, no, it's not about protecting us from radical Islam. It's about protecting Islam from our decadent Western, moralism. But I'm curious to hear your thought about how the Muslim Brotherhood has changed over time, but also if this sort of charges of there being some kind of, neocon, like vast Muslim Brotherhood conspiracy in the West, and sort of the way that the neocons during the War on Terror, how that sort of, in my opinion, sunk the right wing into this this war that could never be won, when in reality maybe we should have been taking some cues from organizations like the Muslim Brotherhood. I don't know, like what do you think of this general?
Well, I think so there are a couple things there. Firstly, I think you're completely correct about the Muslim Brotherhood's ability to create and sustain alternate institutions. That's true. It's literally the only thing they do well. The only thing they do well, the main goal of the Brotherhood is to Islamize societies using a particular methodology, and that's what they do. We saw in Egypt that they're really not very good at running the government, but they're really good at, you mentioned Hollebeck. What was the book what was the book that he wrote?
Submission.
In Submission, right. Thank you. In Submission, it was important for the Brotherhood Party to take control of the Ministry of Education, and that was kind of really well played on his part, because it was exactly right. Those are the things that they're interested in. They're interested in things like ministries of education and ways of propagating, their specific doctrine, which is not, strictly speaking, a religious Islamic doctrine. It has a lot in common with it. You could say that it is, but it's different in some key respects. One, for example, is there's a reason why the Emirates banned U.S. Muslim Brotherhood groups like CARE.
CARE was always the one that came up among neocon circles. Yeah.
Well, yeah. But just because the neocons, didn't like them, it doesn't mean they're great. I mean, these guys were straight up Brotherhood, straight up Hamas. These people were not good and did not have the interests or the survival of the United States and the West and and Christianity at heart.
Well, what's their final goal? What's their mission? How do they want to see the world be?
Well, they would say, they would say very, very clearly, which would be a caliphate.
The global caliphate. Yeah.
I mean, the thing that strikes me today with a lot of the internet culture is that I think that there is a case of F you, Dad, when it comes to any of the, let's say, more kind of like standard milquetoast things that people are used to when it comes to the rhetoric against something, even like, Islamism, where people would look at all the, social justice warrior-ish, kind of clown world things that are going on in today's world, and they would think, you know what, maybe it's not so bad. Maybe it's not so bad if I have 4 wives, and if, I pray 5 times a day. That sounds pretty based and trad-pilled. Maybe that's not the worst thing that would be able to happen, because at least it would keep people, in a certain kind of, framework where everybody knows what they have to do, and yada, yada, yada. I think that seems to be what's going on today online when it comes to people who I think mostly are in the West, mostly are very spoiled, but they're the ones who kind of look at that as being much more adventurous.
Well, they give a narrative to being that's deeper than what is being presented in Western society by and large. So,
I think I've seen a little bit of that. I think there's definitely something to that longing. I don't think it's the right answer. And specifically, it's funny because if you want answers to that thing, you're probably not going to get it from the Brotherhood specifically. The Brotherhood itself is going to be is going to let you down in that respect. You asked about the developments of the Brotherhood over time, and I think what's going on, which is really interesting. It's something I followed for the last, let's say, half decade, is, what I've thought of as Brotherhood in America 2.0, which is when, Brotherhood first got to the United States in the 60s. The key period of activism for the kind of, I don't want to say the first generation of brothers, but let's say like the first generation of Western Brotherhood leaders. These guys were at their, they first started having kids around the late 70s. By now they're kind of retiring and they're being replaced by a new cadre of woke Muslims and who see themselves just as much as, social justice warriors than as Muslims. And this is why, for example, you see CARE doesn't, when it comes to CARE and, the Islamic Society of North America and some of these other Brotherhood fronts, they're really they're kind of torn apart or have been in the recent past about, what to do with, the trans issue, what to do with, what to do with kind of other types of hot button issues that that the woke lunatics are going after. They are not some type of oasis of traditionalism. In the UK, you've got something different because you've got a larger Muslim population, and you've got more local kind of conservative pushback on different issues, and you see some of these Muslim groups with some conservatives coming together to fight, I guess their equivalent of the woke nonsense when it hits them on the local level. But as far as like main Brotherhood on traditional issues or pushing back against the left, you are not going to find it. Because it's a new generation of folks in charge, and they see themselves as, they certainly don't see themselves as Salafis. I'll put it that way.
My God, so you mean to tell me that the Muslim Brotherhood has hojabis within their ranks? Is that, that term, hojabi?
No.
Oh, okay. It was originally insult, but it's kind of like art ho, where the Instagram, TikTok people, it's basically westernized Muslim women who still like wear the veil, but yet they are still like very sexually promiscuous, and
Hmm.
they've largely adopted Western identity politics, but their flavor of Islam gives them sort of a like by POC credibility. That's the
Okay.
connotation around hijabi. So
Yeah, I mean, I would say the likelihood of that thing being part of the Brotherhood is very low. Just because the Brotherhood is an ideological group. You don't just, you don't just show up and say, I'm a Muslim, I'm in the Brotherhood. In fact, a buddy of mine who is a Muslim from a Middle Eastern country went to an Ivy League school. He gets there, and he wants to join some sort of group. And the only group is the MSA, the Muslim Student Association, which is, the first Muslim Brotherhood group established in the United States. And he's like, fuck, man, I'm not joining that group. So he sort of had to create his own. He created his own Saudi student group as an alternative, because he didn't want to get into the whole thing. I mean, shit. Speaking of MSA, I mean, the Muslim Brotherhood's president of Egypt, Mohammed Morsi, joined the Brotherhood in the United States. I think he was at UC Irvine. That's how he got into the Brotherhood, through the MSA there. So it's very much an ideological movement, and the idea that you'd have ditzy,
third generation westernized Muslim women.
Yeah. It's just not. I mean, they could have a checklist of horrible and dumb opinions about all kinds of things. But to say that their Brotherhood is, I think that would be a stretch.
Well, I remember there was Huma Abedin that I remember reading about a couple of years ago, that her mom was associated with CARE, and I haven't really followed up on what exactly was going on.
No, it's so much worse. So much worse. Nobody actually alleged that Huma. Well, okay, I didn't allege. I'll say that. I don't know what. I can't take responsibility for what everybody alleged. But I'll say, like, I don't think Huma Abedin was in the Muslim Brotherhood, but I sure as shit know that her mom was part of the Muslim Sisterhood, was very very much within that universe, and her late father was also her late father was running the Muslim World League, which at the time was based in Saudi Arabia, and it was at that time a total Brotherhood front. So she comes from a family that is very deep inside of that, and I mean, it's sort of like your perfect Brotherhood family in the sense, because they're intellectuals, they are they all have great educations, they're all highly ideological. I mean, how did we know that Huma's mom was involved in this? Well, shit, she's written books about it. And it's not everyday Muslims or everyday anybody that sits down and writes ideological books that that fall very clearly within a particular let's say sect. So they were definitely it's definitely a Brotherhood family. And I think a lot of the folks, I mean, me included, when that thing was happening, I just said, has anybody looked into this? I mean, would I get if I came from that sort of family with that sort of pedigree, would I get a second look? I don't know.
It's interesting to look at, I don't know, like somebody like Ilhan Omar, for instance. I am in no way insinuating, I don't know anything about who she is associated with. All I see is an SJW Muslim connection there, and that always makes me wonder what may be going on in the back.
Yeah, I mean, as far as Ilhan Omar goes, it's kind of interesting because she's very much in that MB 2.0 mold, which is you never see her take positions on any of the social issues, the trad social issues that you would think, you would think that she would take as someone who's, a hijabi Muslim woman in the U.S. Congress. Instead, she's on the other side of it. She's 100% pro Planned Parenthood. She's 100% for the trans agenda, and every other issue. So what's left? Well, what's left is the sort of secular, the secularized parts of that agenda, which is hatred of the United States, hatred of Israel, the kind of traditional left-wing, critique that used to be thought of as anti-imperialist.
Well, with the anti-imperialism, this is an interesting subject for me, where I was reading in the book you were talking about all the way to the Bush administration, the way that they saw a lot of these people in Iraq, where they were applying these universalist values to them, thinking that they're going to elect, the same kind of person who would fit in with a liberal democracy and all that stuff. But I don't know what the official tenets of classical liberalism would be. My tenets would be somewhere along the line of what's that Star Trek? When they go to a planet and they don't want to
non-interference. I forget.
Prime directive.
Prime
is
directive.
That it? Yes.
Oh,
so I think that there may be a bit of a need for a prime directive when it comes to people who may be in a position that they're going to elect somebody that's going to enslave them, because to them that may not be the worst outcome if they generally believe that the kind of freedom we would have in the West would be antithetical to their belief system. So with that, it makes me wonder the wider plan of people who do lean, let's say, more neoconservative, and that's gotten quite a pushback, not just with Trump, but again, like a lot of people online are looking at the various neocon projects over time, seeing them as complete failures, and also seeing this need to have the United States isolate itself fully from whatever's going on. But one more thing I would add to that I'm very curious about your thoughts on is I can never really imagine the United States isolating itself and everything being hunky-dory in the rest of the world, especially if we're talking about countries like, and here goes, the chat is going to be Lev sold out. I always talk about this, and you know it. Russia and China and other nations are going to use gaps of power to conquer other nations. And what is the responsibility of America, so that we don't violate this prime directive and create hell on earth for people, who end up being, getting taken over instead of like some strong men by these religious ideologues, while at the same time, making sure that certain countries out there like Estonia, like Lithuania, don't end up getting invaded, nor would other countries who already had a taste of freedom and don't want to give it up.
Right. Yeah, I mean, okay. There's an answer that I want to give, which is that, that I sort of, let's say, there's the answer that I would give if this was 20 years ago or 30 years ago, and then an answer that I would give in, with the United States as it is today. And they're it's very different. I think we're in a period now where the old lens through which we see foreign policy and the old lens through which we see our relationship with the rest of the world really needs tweaking, if not something more than tweaking, which is to say that we're so divided as a country. The greatest national security threat, actually, even to think of national security threat today, even to say the words is a little bit strange, because you say, immediately you think of, okay, threat to whom? Threat to the government, threat to the people of the United States, threat to half the people of the United States, threat to all of them. These are things that we used to take for granted. We used to take for granted that we could have a coherent foreign policy. But we really, even before you have a coherent foreign policy, you've got to have a coherent set of threats and interests. And your foreign policy is only useful to the extent that it will allow you to deal with the threats and allow you to secure those interests. So the US is in a period right now where, I mean, this shit is really up for grabs. And it's very hard to talk about a single US foreign, what should the United States do in regards to X? Yes, of course, the kind of the old United States would have an interest, for example, in making sure that, would have an interest in, for example, freeing Cuba from the communists. It absolutely would have an interest in that. I mean, we've been talking about this for 50, 60 years already. 2021, though, I think it's a bit of a different story. And obviously, I brought up Cuba, but I mean, we can go to the other issues too. I just think we're in a sort of different place where all of this needs to be rethought. Like, obviously, as far as a place like Cuba goes, or let's say freedom in other parts of the world, anti-communist forces in other parts of the world. Yes, of course, we should support them. But to what extent we do now is really up for grabs, because to be honest with you, I believe that the U.S. government at this time is an illegitimate tyranny. Yeah. And I don't think that it has any relation to the interests of the people of the United States, or at least 50% of those people. I think it's operating against them in a whole host of ways. So even to discuss foreign policy now, it's a little bit weird.
The autonomous political class, in other words, they're making decisions on a foreign policy basis, and the American people's interests be damned, whether it's with offshoring or various excursions and so forth, right?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't, you could think of them as the kind of, the autonomous, an autonomous class. But I mean, let's be really honest about it, though. It's 99.8%. Progressive Democrats.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're dealing with when we say that, when we talk about uniparty in Washington, D.C., on some of these issues, other issues is not so much, but on a lot of this stuff, go to the State Department. 99.8% of those people voted for Biden, and they opposed every possible manifestation of Trump doctrine, whether it be America First or what have you.
Did you see the Dan Rather thing where he said that some general that said that Trump is going to do a coup?
Yeah, no. I mean, it's bad. It's bad. Look, I mean, it's batshit crazy, but it's also projection. It's also it's also completely projection. I mean, as far as the general goes, I mean, look, you can't sit down and we can't have a country in which a general sits down and through his, weird phantasmagoric imaginings, he decides, oh my God, these motherfuckers are going to do a coup. I better, make sure the military does, X, Y, and Z. And at the end of the day, like, clear everything else aside, he just committed a coup. You've got the entire leadership media class, the whole smart set marching in lockstep and saying, and sort of believing things that are manifestly untrue about Trump. We don't even have to get into January 6th or whatever, but like about Trump. And Trump is a Nazi and he's a fascist. This is insane. This is like any normal person who hasn't gone off the deep end, could see that it's insane. It's a mass delusion. And yet you've had for 4 years, a bunch of 5 years, you've had the people who are most responsible for being straight arrows, for being legit good analysts of national security policy, these people went completely off the deep end.
Yeah.
And that's a scary time. I mean, just as an American, it's a really scary time. We should all be afraid in one sense. We should be afraid that these people have awesome power. We've given them awesome power. They've taken it as well. And look, I mean, like, I have to admit, I was wrong about a whole host of shit during the Bush years. I could not imagine that we would have, you know, for example, like the FISA issue and the spying and things like that. I could not imagine that one day we would be in a position where, you know, where the national security apparatus and bureaucracy would sort of break down and say, no, we're going to target our fellow Americans. I thought that they had more integrity than that. I was a fucking idiot. And, you know, I was young, but
well,
look
at someone
like
John
for that.
Like, look at John Brennan. He tweets like literally a 15-year-old Tumblr girl. I mean, come on, this guy, man. Yeah. But someone, Ivan had a good point in the chat saying that you can't have a multiracial, multicultural country and think politics can ever be sane. That's true. I mean, as a Canadian, I think that's pretty true. But what do you think? I mean, go ahead.
Okay. I mean, I don't think that's true, because politics was relatively sane for a really long time in the United States in many ways. If the answer is in the end, it's never, you know, in the end, it always breaks up. So you know, so you've got that problem. Well, in the end, everything always breaks up. Nothing lasts forever. I do think that he has something there on a slightly different point. Maybe it's the one that he's making, which is that I think it's a scale issue more than anything else. This is all a scale issue. You can't, you know, things that are possible with smaller, more homogeneous states are just not possible in the long run with you know, large multi, you don't even have to get into multi-ethnic. You know, we have enough differences within us in the United States, just ideologically, even before you get into the ethnic stuff. But, you know, both of these things obviously have some kind of effect. And you just can't do it on the scale of empire and have it last long. Plus, I mean, you know, can you have, I mean, this was always the problem with the idea of a propositional nation, which is that, yeah, obviously that proposition changes and mutates over time. What are you going to do to keep it, you know, relatively, you know, on the straight and narrow?
If I were to take up the argument of somebody who, while they would be very anti-Trump, they would not be the traditional, you know, Donald Trump, KKK, go away, anti-gay, all that stuff. But somebody
no KKK, no USA,
yeah, exactly.
No Trump.
but somebody who would take a wider look at the things that are going on, regardless of whether they're right and wrong, and say, this is an example of somebody who stepped over the elites and went right to the people. We've seen examples of people stepping over the elites and going right to the people throughout history. This may not be a good precedent to be set, regardless, even if he's the golden god and does everything wonderfully. The very fact that you would disrupt a particular system, which, from what I understand, I could be wrong, the intention of the founding fathers was that, you know, any hamster can go and be a president, and then they'll be able to be voted out. And then somebody else will be able to come in. And there's a separation of powers, and there's some kind of balancing going on here. So the people who cherish the American system and don't want there to be a dictator to step in there, those would be the criticism that they would levy at somebody like Trump. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what would you say is the health of this system that the founding fathers created at the moment? Is it something that is as resilient as they would have intended it to be? That would be kind of like the first question there.
Yeah, I think it's dead. I agree. I think it's completely dead, and you know, I mean, and it died of several causes. You know, identifying, identifying all of those causes or fighting about which one of those was the greatest contributing one to the eventual death is almost it's almost a waste of time. But yeah, I mean, the big one that I come back to, which is really basic, is that our idea of the concept of equal justice upon which the nation was based is gone.
Yep.
The concept of what is justice for half the country is completely different than the definitional justice from the founding. So we've got a real problem there, because that's the very basic root of everything. The legitimacy of the regime has been questioned.
Have we not experienced that before in any case? If we're talking about the Civil War, if we're talking about, I mean, look at FDR, for instance. The guy, from what I understand, was about to create a totalitarian communist dictatorship in a certain way with the way that he was going. Luckily he... But like there are examples.
Maybe not communist, Lev, but that's
but there are examples.
Maybe, yeah.
Sure. Well, there are examples that I can look at. Well, he had a lot of Stalinist communists who were working under him, but I think that there were incidents of America being on the brink of death before. So that's why I just want to be a little bit of a kind of pushback as much as
no, but these are two different things. Okay, so these are two different things. When I say death or dead, I mean the answer to that question is the sort of America of the founding. That's another issue. That's not exactly the question of whether or not America is dead, is in a state of total collapse. I mean, we can go on this way for quite some time, which has really been the history of the world. Is regimes mutating into something else. I think the regime of the founders is dead. What's happening now, you could say, you brought up FDR. You could make a very good case. I mean, I have friends that for years have talked about the case. This all went to shit. After FDR's attacks on the Commerce Clause and a lot of the changes from the New Deal. Then you've got people who are talking about, it's been shit since we went off the gold standard. There are many different
Civil Rights Act
ways of understanding the Civil Rights Act, right? Free association and things like that. You've got Caldwell's books Caldwell's
Age of Entitlement
recent book that gets into that in many other ways too. So you've got many different diagnoses, but for my money, that's really the big one. It's disunity and the concept of justice specifically.
But I think that the problem I have with Lev's analysis here is that, a lot of conservatives, I think it came from, as much as I admire what they were saying, it came from the John Birch Society of it's the FDR was a communist and he was a Soviet. I think that really the problem with that is it's sort of kind of like Jordan Peterson talking about postmodern Marxism, which doesn't make sense. It's sort of like ignoring the native born rot wasting blight that is in the American project itself, and at least from my opinion. And what would you say to the people that would criticize America on its own grounds rather than saying some foreign antigen came about, whether it be communism or the Frankfurt School or whatever, that led to this immense amount of decay? And then eventually I wanted to ask you about the Arab Spring because someone asked in the chat. But for the first one, please.
Sure.
Yeah.
About that. Yeah, this is basically an argument that my friend Michael Anton addresses in his book, The Stakes. I think well. I would just add that, of course, the seeds of the decline and fall could be found, in retrospect, really anywhere and everywhere. I think it's really easy to go back and to say, oh, it was the founding was, the founding contained the kernel or the speck of dust that eventually metastasized and brought us all down. The truth of the matter is entropy is a thing.
Yeah.
And you're not going to have, okay, let's say you reject liberalism, and you reject, you're an Islamist, you reject the Enlightenment, you reject all these things, even Salafis who want to return to the time of Muhammad, they're still operating in, 2020, 2021. And they're still dealing with human beings as they are in 2021. And
that's true.
So there's no formula that's like, okay, liberalism sucks because it contains the seeds of, of all this. But here's an alternate project. Here's an alternate mode of analysis that will be free of this problem. It's a problem. It's it's humanity. I mean, I think the founding was was the best attempt, but it was also an attempt that it was very clear that the founders believed that it was a project dependent on a virtuous society.
Yes.
And it's not virtuous as sort of objectively understood, and also virtuous as, I mean, it's not for everybody. It's just not for everybody, and it's not for everybody at every time. And I think that a lot of people are kind of thinking back on those words, or at least on that sentiment, and they're thinking, maybe there's something to it. Maybe this project has failed, and we need to start thinking about some other arrangement.
Do you think that a post-liberalism could ever be possible in our lifetime, or is it just like maybe when the sun explodes?
Well, how do you define post-liberalism?
Yeah, that's the question.
Oh, I think a sort of, from a ground up, a different sort of distinctive political ontology that is grounded in something different than, what would you say, modern rootless individualism that is so foundational to
but when you say that,
quasi-religious belief in.
It also sounds like you're advocating for a dictatorship. I just don't see any other way of achieving what you're talking about.
Well, maybe, Lev, who knows? But I think that it's difficult, and I think even Deneen, he, near the end of why liberalism failed, it's like, what's the solution? What is post-liberalism? It's something that you can't really imagine because, like you've said, we live in the liberal epoch. It's the air we breathe. But if we were to sort of overturn the assumptions people have, not just about politics, but of human nature itself and what we derive value from, I mean, there's no easy answer, but I think it would take a radical reimagining of how we not just do politics, but culture and even religiosity, which scares people for a lot of reasons nowadays. I don't know, like, what do you think in general? Like, when that term post-liberalism is bandied about by even people, like in academia even, what immediately comes to mind? I have my own ideas, but they're not very well thought out. I think nobody's ideas are well thought out when it comes to post-liberalism, but what's your take?
I agree with you on that. I mean, I feel like the thing to do now, I don't even know. I don't have I don't have a particular solution. Maybe that's a failing of mine for this particular issue. What I would like to get people to do, though, and I'm trying, and I try to do it, maybe to some success, maybe to no success, but I try to get people to not be afraid of thinking about some of these foundational things. For example, the mindless individualism stuff, and say, hey, wait a minute, or even the idea that liberalism itself is something that cannot be questioned, and if you do, you're a horrible Nazi. So I say, no, let's step back. Let's at least put this under questioning, and let's be open to the idea that the current arrangement, the arrangement where that we have all kind of grown up and lived in for all of our lives, and frankly for the last very long time, is not the only way of doing things. And I just don't want people to be kind of irrationally scared about some of these things and some of these questions. And to have the debate is good.
Absolutely. Well, that's why I encourage people who come on here to try to push back as much as they can at me. And I find that even though I am on the side of classic liberalism, whatever you want to call it, I want it to be challenged as much as possible so that I can actually see how much it would be able to stand up to a lot of the criticism. The only problem
Cringe,
is that
bro. Cringe.
Well, that's the whole thing. That's the whole
No,
thing.
no,
I think that people have a very high.
So the issue with classical liberalism is like, hey, it's great if everyone is a classical liberal.
That's true.
At a certain point, and I feel like we were there for a minute. At a certain point, though, when a vanishingly small percentage of the folks are classical liberals or see the world that way, what are you going to do? I mean, I think the biggest, I think a lot of people look over at classical liberals and they see that they're completely disarmed in the battle with the left. They're completely disarmed. Every possible solution that they have is basically, okay, we're fucked now. And just to accept it. And you see a bunch of people, people who are not, especially thought of as, folks in the kind of normie world, who are not thought of as sort of these types of people or dissident right people, like, my friend Kurt Schlichter will say, if your rules means that I lose every time, fuck your rules. And we're not going to accept this because this is just, it's just unacceptable that we get that we always get steamrolled this way. So I mean, I think that's the big draw for people, for the post-liberal folks, or the people who are at least thinking beyond liberalism, which is that, classical liberalism does not give me the tools with which to fight an enemy that is, today's left.
But when you choose a different kind of tool, the question for me is the medicine worse than the infection when it comes to, let's say, having a dictator come in? I know I keep using dictator.
Yeah. Right.
But you see the point. It's like, how much would it be a matter of the dictator being some Legend of the Galactic Heroes type? I don't know if you know that reference. Great anime. I recommend you check it out.
Just say Caesar Augustus.
Okay, fine, whatever.
Like
someone like that.
Come on, anime.
versus that Caesar Augustus, croaking out.
Versus
and then
Caligula.
Being replaced by somebody much worse, where that system does not seem to be stable. It seems to be something that's not going to last a long time. So at the least, I would encourage people to try and put up a lot more of a fight to preserve the kind of system that's not going to result in the worst that humanity has to offer.
Well, what is the worst that humanity has to offer? I mean, these things are all very bad. So if, I mean, we're talking about, let's say, I mean, here we are, 2021. We're talking about a trans couple, whatever, a kid and breastfeeding the kid. Yeah. This video that everyone has seen that has been, whatever, sponsored or promoted by Facebook. Okay.
Oh, but it's just a sexual fetish that's not real, though. That's what people say on the left. It's not real, bro. It's just a fetish. You're making it up. So
yeah. But that kid, when he grows up and he, tragically commits suicide or kills his parents or is alienated, or, I mean, every possible terrible scenario from that on down. I mean, that's having an effect on someone. That's absolutely having a real effect. Well, kids learning that in school, that because of the pigmentation of their skin, they're essentially demons. I mean, this is not cost-free shit. This is not this is not nonsense. This is kind of as serious as it gets for a civilization. and and being disarmed in terms of kind of what we joke about, David Frenchism,
Oh God.
being disarmed in the
Man.
fight against this is unacceptable to a lot of people. I mean, it is to me, but I think that's why people are abandoning. And it's really funny because if the left was interested in maintaining the kind of classical liberal universe that we imagined as our ideal, and and in some ways we kind of grew up with in the post-war world, they would be doing everything differently.
Now, I want to push back a little bit on the blackpilling that we're receiving right now with, for example, an organization. And I know, Gio, you're going to cringe. I don't care. There's this organization called Fair for All. I don't know, David, have you heard of it?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of it. I don't know too much about them, to be honest.
So just to say a little bit about what they do right now, they bring in lawyers and other people to help in terms of the teachers that right now are getting reprimanded.
Fuck off. I'm sorry. The answer to this is not in the courts. It's just not in the courts.
Oh,
you're not going to sit. You're not what you want. You want the basis of your civilization, or you want the most heavy issues you can possibly comprehend being adjudicated by one lawyer in a filthy robe. No.
But it's like people that say that we have to like ban CRT in school. I think what it's going to provoke is it's going to feed a narrative that some of these like woke teachers on TikTok, which are middle-aged white women, awfuls, they're pretending that it's going to be like the Underground Railroad, and they're going to deliver the truth, like how like in the Soviet Union and Poland, how they had to hide priests in the cubby holes. It's like that's what they're going to say. It's not, the answer is not to force our enemies to teach our kids what we want. The answer is to redacted Minecraft. No, I'm kidding. The answer is to just fire them. But like, what do you think of the whole response that people like Chris Rufo and others, like what they're doing with that, or James Lindsay, or
whatever? But just real quick though, I'm still happy that they're making a bit of an effort, whatever that may entail. I know it's not enough, but still, I'm glad that they're doing something.
About Lindsay and Rufo.
Well, not just about Lindsay and Rufo, but about supporting the teachers that get
canned.
Well,
Rufo is involved in this organization
because they criticize critical race theory. Because it seems to me like Rome wasn't built in a day. This has just started right now, and since it's just started, maybe it has potential to grow into something bigger.
Right? Yeah. Look, I mean, this is all to the good. I mean, the people who take shots at Lindsay and Rufo, who are they're both friends. I think are completely out of their minds, totally misguided and worthless. No. Because these guys are building something. You may disagree with them on points on the margins, or on some issue here or there, which I guess could be discussed individually, point by point. But at the end of the day, I mean, Lev is right. You're building a movement. You are really creating for the first fucking time in the United States on the right a grassroots mechanism of organizing and activism. We have not had that. But
what's interesting is I wouldn't really say they're on the right. What they're doing specifically is I think that they are targeting the fence sitters, people who live in New York City who are sick of their kids having to learn all this junk, who otherwise didn't really put up any kind of fight earlier.
The problem though is that I think like the powerful weapon of the left is the optics of a bunch of like parents of rich kids. Like the whole media apparatus has turned towards if you don't like CRT in school, that means you're probably secretly a racist that is a bourgeois rich person. And so people like Lindsay and Rufo, I have more of admiration for Rufo. I desperately wish that James Lindsay could come on BTR and debate me and Alex Kashuda. Yeah. But I think that the problem is that the narrative is that, well, like typically with conservatism in terms of the official like punditry, when they talk about an issue, they tend to talk about it to death, and then the leftist media will be like, oh, that's boring, let's move on, or oh, that's not non-issue, you don't really understand CRT. So what do you think, like how can conservatives or people on the right, like, I mean, when I hear the word conservative, I want to take a shower, obviously, but how do you think that they can maneuver around the media apparatus that is telling people that if you're against this, then you're a terrible racist and you probably hate our glorious BIPOC, glorious automated luxury,
Look,
neoliberalism?
if you think you're going to sort of, if you think you're going to figure out a clever strategy that prevents the enemy from deploying their, a much stronger enemy from deploying their own strategy, it's, you're going to be looking in vain. So I think these guys are very effective. Specifically, I mean, they do different things, and they're definitely on the right, but they're not only speaking to folks on the right. They're speaking to folks who are important, who are on the middle, in let's say in the reasonable middle, because when you're looking at issues like this, like CRT, it's not really a traditional left-right issue in terms of, I mean, on the face of it, it's so absurd and insane.
Yeah.
That any normal person, again, will just say, when exposed to this, will just say, okay, that's just bonkers, that's nuts, that's going too far at the most, or at the least. And so I think they and Rufo specifically is talking to those people, and you know what, we need those people. And the biggest advantage, or the strategy that the left is deploying when it comes to this issue, is to say, it doesn't exist. We don't teach it.
And when we do,
CRT, and when we do, it's just, CRT is wonderful. It's just teaching about the legacy of slavery and blah blah blah,
whiteness,
blah, blah.
And implicit
but
racism.
But how many people are even falling for it today? I mean, I'm in New York, so I'm in an echo chamber when it comes to the amount of people who would relatively fall for it than not. But even there, like whenever I have a private conversation with somebody, they unanimously express to me that they think that this is fucking ridiculous. That gives me hope. I don't know if it's enough though.
Yeah, look, I mean, it should give you hope, and I mean, as Chris has said a whole bunch of times, and I think James has said it too a bunch of times, and it's the truth. It's like, it's not, this particular CRT campaign is, it includes more than just what is traditionally understood as CRT. This is all of this shit is yet another public education campaign. And it's one on which we are on really, really solid ground, I think, with most of the American people, and and it's good, and I think it's waking people up. I think it's absolutely waking people up. I mean, would you rather have folks lining up to try to fight CRT in schools and in the boardrooms and in other places? Or would you rather not have it? Would you rather have this go on sort of indefinitely? I mean, it's been going on for years anyway. It's been going on in at the level of education for a long time. It's only now, of course, as everyone has pointed out, it's the Zoom era that has allowed the kids, or the kids' parents, to see what's going on there. Yeah. So it's like, I mean, this is kind of like this is a gimme for the right. And if you believe that it is dangerous for the and let's say if you believe that it's a very bad thing for the to have this the screaming about whiteness and all the other nonsense that's sort of part of this program, and the hatred of white people, and et cetera. I mean, if you think that that's a horrible thing, then a fight on this issue is what you should be looking forward to. You should get into it, and you should find allies where you can. the idea that you go around and you say, well, so-and-so said something on a live stream or in an interview, blah, 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 and I don't agree with it, therefore he's bad, therefore the whole thing is bullshit. And I think that's taking a view of it that is not realistic or appropriate.
But the point being is that to push back, don't you feel that with every issue that people on the right have rallied around, there tends to be an entropy, but also there's this notion that if they just push hard enough, it's like the accelerationist thing, the vulgar definition, not the real philosophy, but if they just push back hard enough, if they like normalize trans kids, then maybe normies will wake up and we can go back to, I don't know, the Ronald Reagan days. Well, that never seems to happen. They're pushing so hard that we just let them, do whatever they want.
Maybe something's going to happen with Congress right now. If we're looking at the next election, how many people are pissed off with the job that's currently being done that, they're not going to vote against the people who are currently in power right now? That gives me a little bit of hope. It could be unfounded hope.
I don't think elections matter anymore, Lev. That's my...
David, would you give my statement a bit of credence?
I'm in between. I don't think elections matter at all about the big issues. I don't think that I specifically Congress. I mean, Congress doesn't mean shit anymore. But within, on the extremities, it can't make or break. But in the middle, there's a lot that there's a lot negative that can happen from Democrats controlling Congress, and there's some positive that can happen from Republicans controlling Congress. The positive part translates into time.
Yeah.
Quiet and time and nothing. Would I rather have, and this is, I had arguments about this, about, control of the Senate and things like that with some friends, because many friends of mine said, who cares? Both, the Republicans are the worst. Let them lose. We don't even need them in power because they do nothing for us.
They're losers.
Blah, blah, blah.
They are
total
losers.
Yeah.
I
agree. They're total losers. Yes, totally agree. It hurts me. Like, the idea that they would win hurts me because I know that they don't deserve it.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Great. Totally on board. On the other hand, you've got Dems who are so bad and so hateful and destructive of anything that we want.
The four horsewomen, you mean?
Yeah. or even Pelosi. We see with this January 6th, with this insane January 6th
kneeling
thing.
And doing the
No, but that seems like such a LARP. That seems like such a LARP. She's pretending. I don't think she truly believes.
But does it matter materially? Though,
I don't care if they get on their knee. I don't care. Like, on one hand, if they get on their knee and they do this LARP bullshit. On the other hand, they actually do like the January 6th stuff with the DOJ, which is the real shit. That's what I care about. I don't care if they get on one knee. I care if they use January 6th as a pretext to go after, quote unquote extremists, basically to replay the war on terror, but here at home. That's the stuff that I care about. That's the stuff that I care about. I don't care if they virtue signal. That's like a laugh, and that's a snicker. But the really important shit is that stuff. And look, if you'd have a Republican Congress now, would you have DOJ oversight? No, probably not. But would you have an empowered DOJ knowing that that whatever they do, they can get away with for sure, 100%, free and clear? You don't want that either. So at the end of the day, I would rather have Republicans in control of Congress.
But why do you think when it comes to the DOJ specifically, I know he was surrounded, like you even alluded to this, that Trump was surrounded by just absolutely dog shit terrible people, including his own son-in-law.
No, it's because he didn't know the difference, and he still doesn't.
But because why did he sit on his hands with the DOJ specifically and other issues? Like, I know for example, and I know I'm maybe going to get controversial by mentioning him by name, but the Ricky Vaughn case, right? He did the Samizdat artwork.
Right.
He was given somewhat legal protection during the Trump years. People like him Which, by the way, I think
I don't
what's
think he
happening to him
was.
is.
I don't think he was.
But well, now that's being lifted. That's the argument that. But go ahead. What's your take on it? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he was being given legal protection. I think the people who wanted to go after him, and I'm no fan of his, but I think what's being done to him in this case is very unjust.
Yeah. I thought it was funny at the time, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, at the time, I totally missed it. At the time, it
was weird internet stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I totally missed it at the time, but I think the folks who wanted to go after him, who ended up actually going after him, they were the same people who were sitting there in the Department of Justice all throughout Trump, and they said we can go after him now, or we can wait until basically the statute of limitations is almost up, and we're going to nail him then. And I think that's what they did. I think they did that on purpose. Had it happened under Trump, same thing. Nothing. I mean, I don't. So think it's like sadistic
it's like sadistic psychological terrorism to get him right before the statute of limitations runs out.
That's what I think. That's what I think it was, because I mean, these guys would have done it under Trump.
Oh yeah.
I mean, look what else they did.
Well, there's also a related thing that Jules posted. Exclusive: Donald Trump's former fundraiser claims ex-CIA agents hacked him. Jared Kushner's diplomat, confidant, and string of Americans as part of campaign of spying and blackmail for Gulf state of Qatar. So I don't know if you've heard that.
I have not. Can you send me that?
Absolutely.
But
and
also,
posting the link in the chat as well.
Yeah, when Lev is posting that, I wanted really quickly, because this is a fascinating thing about the Trump era, but what do you think, because before I forget, about the Arab Spring, do you think the Arab Spring was like a glow-in-the-dark CIA front, or do you think it was organic? I personally think the narrative that it was organic is total bullshit. But what do you think? Like, do you agree with the Darren Beattie analysis of the Arab Spring being concocted by the intelligence agencies and now they're bringing it over here? Like, what do you think about that, having been researching the Middle East and so forth?
I love Darren. He's a friend of mine. We have disagreements on certain things, and I mean, I haven't heard his take on the Arab Spring, so I'm not gonna disagree with it out of hand. But yeah, I mean, I think there's the Arab Spring was a Brotherhood / Qatari project.
Oh wow!
And
even in Tunisia when it started.
Sure. I mean, the whole thing was, and in fact, I mean, the Saudis and the Emiratis and the Egyptians and whatever, the first, when they sort of went at Qatar in 2017, the first line item was, you guys use Al Jazeera to create revolutions in our countries. And that's exactly what they did. Whether or not it was a kind of CIA hatched plan or a Brotherhood hatched plan, I mean, we've got the Brotherhood announcing that it's going to go to war in November, late November 2010. It's before the Arab Spring broke out, and not many people noticed it. Almost nobody noticed it, but Barry Rubin, and it was like, hey, this is kind of significant. And then the Arab Spring kicked off. I mean, I don't think we have I know that the CIA was, the CIA has been pro-Islamist since literally the very beginning. There's a great book on this called Mosque in Munich.
Wow.
And it's by Ian Johnson. It's riveting. It's absolutely riveting. And it's about how the CIA, grabbed a bunch of Muslim brothers as they were being kicked out of Egypt and decided to use them as weapons against the Soviet Union, because here were religious Muslims who had credibility.
The Mujahideen and
with religious Muslims, and the CIA ended up setting them up Mosque in Munich. Literally, they built them a mosque in Munich, and they settled them in Europe and in the United States, and and hooked them up. And as a matter of fact, I think it was Saeed Ramadan, who was the son of the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, went to meet Eisenhower, and at the White House. So the relationship between the Brotherhood and the CIA was very long. I mean, I know, my who I just mentioned, my friend Barry Rubin, was around during the, I think, early 80s or mid 80s, when the CIA had a project to sort of rehabilitate the Brotherhood. So that was always on the menu, and they were always a kind of pro-Brotherhood force. Whether or not they had a hand in doing these things color revolution style, I think that's a different matter. It's certainly possible. I don't think there's very much evidence to suggest that it was a thing that happened, but we know that the Brotherhood saw advantage in it, and the Brotherhood was the one organizing a lot of the rallies and doing a lot of these things. So I think they kind of deserve a lot of the credit. That's one thing that they know how to do very well. Plus, you've also got the kind of accident of social media and all this stuff. I think giving the Arab Spring credit or giving the CIA credit for the Arab Spring, maybe overselling it, because they're nowhere near that competent.
I wanted to circle back, as Jen Psaki loves saying, to you mentioning Al Jazeera. And when it comes to, let's say, and I was talking to Gio about this before, when it comes to the Al Jazeera reporters in that building that was bombed by Israel inside of the Gaza Strip, what I'm interested in what's going on here, from what I understand, please correct me if I'm wrong, the people who report on stories within Gaza, they have a very strict, rule set as far as what they are and are not allowed to say. If they criticize Hamas, they get kicked out. And I'm just curious. Or killed, yeah. So I'm curious, when it comes to, let's say, the side of, Gio's internet friends, there does seem to be this, and Gio, you know this, there is an overwhelming consensus against Israel, and I find that it's both people who are more on the reactionary side of the right.
Again,
no, we can't avoid it. We gotta go through the tunnel. So when it comes to people who are more on the reactionary side, be it like left or right, they both seem to really not like Israel. They see it as an apartheid state, whatever you want to say. What would be Gio, first, what would be your main criticisms of the current situation? Because you may be right on certain things. You just want to, get a little bit more detailed about it.
What do you specifically with? Well, yeah, I mean, of course, the general criticism of Israel's involvement in American foreign policy and how the Israeli lobby is such an omnipotent entity within Washington that there really is it's quite lacking the material interest that Israel provides America, in my opinion. But that's
what does the Israeli lobby in the United States look like?
Well, what's the one organization?
AIPAC?
Yeah, AIPAC and others, and I think really the only way to do politics in America when it comes to foreign policy is you have to have this extreme deference to the various ideological and material goals of the Israeli state, and it's almost anathema to even consider challenging their funding and things of that nature. I mean, without getting into too much detail, but just in general, the criticism of the American relationship to Israel and how we've sort of put our, hitched our wagon to this deeply problematic state in the Middle East for various reasons. Yeah, I mean, obviously
I am, but I would take issue with kind of a bunch of those things. And of course I should have written it. I should have written it down. I mean, when we talk the big difference between Israel and other countries when it comes to influence is that for other countries that the money comes from, usually it's money that we're dealing with coming from abroad into this country. And in regards to Israel, the money begins in this country. So it's people who like Israel and support Israel in this country that are, let's say, influencing policy in that direction, because frankly, 75-80% of the American people support Israel. So it's not a particularly difficult situation to kind of come to terms with. And that's really the kind of the bottom line. I mean, we're not talking about. I mean, once you compare, let's say the Israel lobby, which AIPAC is different in many ways, to any other country's lobby. But like compare Israel to the Saudis or really any other country, with whom we have friendly relations, and the differences are really stark. And most of the time, it comes from how much money does Israel spend on lobbying in the United States? Zero. All that comes from the United States. People who say, I think the Israeli-U.S. relationship is valid and worthwhile. I'm going to, invest in it. I'm going to, give money to different causes that will maintain it and keep it strong, yada, yada, yada. That's a different conversation than if you're talking about foreign influence. It's a completely different conversation.
Yeah, I agree. It's largely domestic. But wouldn't you say that, for example, there was this recent, and what's the Israeli equivalent to the New York Times, Haaretz? Am I pronouncing that?
Yeah.
Haaretz, yeah. There was this article, and this is a fairly left-wing paper, talking about how the Israelis have a right to preserve their ethnic majority in their own country, but yet you have organizations here like the ADL that viciously attack people that say that maybe America should have a very restrictive foreign policy and immigration policy and should maintain the not so much a pluralistic, but sort of this American stock, if you will, that the people, like, for example, the nationalists and the America First people and other
I think
I'm talking about the far right.
It's a mix. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. I think it's a
the
mix
white nationalists.
Between,
let's say the white nationalists. They point out the hypocrisy.
So that issue that you're talking about, the comparison between sort of like having a not say an ethno state, but like having the difference between different rules between Israel and the United States when it comes to this stuff. Well, it's a silly argument, because number one is ADL is a left-wing, highly partisan Democrat organization.
Right.
If you challenge the ADL right now to say, how do you feel about preserving Israel's demographic advantage vis-a-vis Jewish demographic advantage vis-a-vis Muslims in Israel, they wouldn't say yes. They would, they're not big Zionists at the ADL. Are you kidding me? That organization, and I know, Tucker did a segment
yes
here.
And no.
What do you mean yes and no?
I think that they would probably align with Zionist interests if push comes to shove. If there was a genuine nativist, if there was a genuine right-wing nativist opposition in America, then I think that was probably their fear during the Trump administration, that it would embolden white nationalists to create a sort of nativist political order in America. I think if push comes to shove, they probably would have aligned with maybe not the interests of Likud, obviously, but I think that
correct me if I'm wrong.
Hold on a second. This is
I'm sorry if I've offended you.
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. I just want to make sure to get this, to get this right.
Yeah.
But the problem here is that on the left, the folks on the left see Israel as a horrible fascist state.
Right.
And then folks on the right see Israel as a bunch of, fake and gay, socialist one-worlders.
Tel Aviv pride parades.
Right. And it's completely ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous how that would, and for some reason, both of these things, sort of can exist simultaneously. And, and look, you've got a tremendous disconnect between, between a lot of American Jews who are fanatically leftist, who may identify themselves as Jews. I don't think they will identify themselves at all as Zionists in the future.
They'd be much more open borders for Israel type of people.
The argument,
Of course, these are the same people who've been telling Israel to die.
No, but
these are the same, right?
Yeah, I understand, but I think the problem is that the
See,
people...
Gio, you don't realize how many Jews hate other Jews' guts.
No, but
and
the
how
problem,
much they're willing to go against.
The argument, the counter argument by the far right is that, and keep in mind, I'm not a white nationalist because I'm Italian. That's very problematic. But I would say that it is an apt argument that when people like Ben Shapiro, and at least someone mentioned Ben Shapiro, they say that, well, they're not quote unquote real Jewish people. I think that I think that's kind of like, and I know there's a lot of infighting among various sects of people who identify as ethnic or religious Jews, but I think that the argument to say that they're not quote unquote real Jews if they don't support Israel, I think that is equally another source of exclusion that's very convenient for more conservative people of the cloth to make. I think that to discredit they obviously don't have an allegiance to the Israeli state, obviously.
I mean, you can get extremely Jewish to the point of having like that disheveled beard. If we're talking about like the upper Haredis, whatever you call them, like the ultra Orthodox people who believe that because the Messiah hasn't come yet, there shouldn't be Israel. You can get those people as well into the mix.
Yeah, well.
But I would still say that they're Jewish, but they're very nutty. For me, it goes back to high-level civilization, where I would equate Israel with something like Estonia, for example, or Latvia, or like some of the other Baltic nations, as far as I like what both are doing as far as being high-level civilizations where people who, let's say, live in the United States would be able to relatively get along and be within the culture.
Yeah, but Lev, the Latvians, they're not
Estonia.
Keeping their neighbors in a state of a giant open-air prison. That's...
Well, again, like when we're talking about here we go. Yes.
Oh, come on. Giant open air prison. Like,
well,
no, but you've got to be.
Go ahead.
No. But I mean, an understanding of the history here is really important.
Right.
And when you want to start that clock, I'd say you can start it, going back anytime, hundreds of years, or even with the start of Israel, or the 30s, or the 20s, or what have you. But you can't just start the clock, let's say, in August of 1967 and say, okay, we're not dealing with anything here. All of a sudden, Israel is in control of these territories, and that's the point of view that sort of leads to what you're saying. The other thing is like an open air prison. An open air prison compared to what? Would you rather be in Gaza than to be in a territory run by Pakistan?
Well,
maybe not, but they do control their water and their resources. That's where people get.
Yeah. Well, look, sure, they control their water and their resources, and they give them their water and resources. What do you want them to do?
Well, Gio, the example.
I don't know.
Wait, hold on. The example. I'm gonna bring up a good example, which is Fatah.
You two are getting. Where is my good friend? Where is my good friend Indian Bronson to defend me here? Because you guys.
No. I'm gonna ask him to come on. But my whole take here, David, is that if you have a Fatah, for example, there is relative peace, from what I understand, between Fatah and Israel. They're not doing any military activity at all in those particular regions, nor is there any military grievances now between Saudi Arabia, between all the other Muslim nations except for Qatar, and also except for Iran. I see that as a good thing, and I imagine in the future, if there was ever peace between the Gaza Strip and Israel, then a lot of whatever restrictions are put on right now would stop. There will be no reason for there to be the restrictions there are right now as far as movement or any of that, but since they keep getting bombed and they keep getting attacked, and tunnels, and by the way, incredibly rich people, millionaires live in the Gaza Strip, maybe even billionaires, who finance a lot of money into these tunnels where Hamas is able to go through the tunnels
that's another issue
and attack the farmers in Israel.
No, but attacking farmers in Israel with rockets that barely work compared to the Israeli defense
barely
force,
work. They blow up themselves when they're trying to get those
This is
rockets.
why I didn't want to talk about this issue.
No, but it is an
Oh
important
my
thing.
God.
It is an important thing to bring out because I do want it to be a lot clearer on what exactly we're dealing with and have all the proper criticisms
let me
leveled
ask.
out
Okay,
at the same time.
let me ask you this: the language of an open air prison is very strong. Obviously, maybe I'm a little attracted a little bit, but do you think that there is a problem with the Israeli settlements? And there's a problem definitely with, there have been noted human rights abuses in the past of the Palestinians. Do you think that and let's please move on from Israel. My God.
Okay,
but,
this will be the last.
But do you think, David, that there is a problem with the way the Israelis handle various territories that are disputed?
I think Israelis handle the disputed territories better than any of their neighbors would even consider. I mean, do you know about the refugee camps that exist in Lebanon, in Jordan, in Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, that is.
Give me a break. I mean, if Palestinians could choose tomorrow between living, look at Gaza. You know, the worst thing you can do to the Egyptians is to give them Gaza. They don't want it. They've militarized that border to make sure that nobody from Gaza goes into Egypt. There's a reason for that. And
that's true.
And you're dealing with, look, I mean, it's like you're dealing with a situation that really, I mean, it's not a good one. It's really not a good one because you've in 1967, you fought what was a defensive war. You have taken territory in that defensive war, or the enemy has lost territory to you in that war. And it's like, okay, what are we going to do now? And at the conclusion of hostilities in 1967, Jordan and Egypt specifically said, okay, we're not negotiating with you. We're negotiating with a new entity called Palestine. That territory is no longer, this negotiation isn't between us. It's between you and this other group that is going to sort of take over negotiations. And that's when that whole thing started. I mean, we're talking about Egyptian and Jordanian territory. And, so it's very difficult. Then you've got a question of, okay, who is in charge? Then you've got a question of, what kind of civil society is there, blah, 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 blah. Like it's in the interest of nobody in Israel to say, okay, well, you know what? We don't care what the fuck is who the fuck is governing it or what's going on here, but we're going to set up another country, another state. We're going to give land away and set up another state that will be probably run by terrorists, very short distance from our capital cities. And that'll be good. Why? Because justice, that's why. And nobody would do this. Nobody sane would do this. Nobody sane would think about doing this.
But I guess the problem is that from the very creation of Israel, I mean, the Palestinians feel that they've been kicked out of their home and that it's sort of there's a hotly disputed, the jury is still out on the issue of lineage of people, like
but just to be clear, there were
Zionism.
2 states that were created. There was Israel and there was Palestine.
But are they truly 2 states? That's the problem. Are they truly 2 states?
No, but okay, a lot of people have grievances about a lot of things. Okay.
Right.
So what is it to me?
The Jews that were living in the Palestinian territory had to move out as well. So the whole thing,
but Lev, that was minuscule compared to the. Oh my God! See, let's move on because I personally think us Christians should control all of that land. But that's there's.
Well, let me put it this way. Let me put it this way, David. I personally think that there has been a lot more pressure to, let's say, I think Israel and Jews in general have to, my personal opinion, not anybody else's, have had to jump through way more hurdles in order to prove themselves to be as close to saintly as possible. And if you don't get to this level of saintliness, then you are going to be lobbed far harder than many other people who have committed much worse things in the world. And I'm not exactly sure why that is the case. And I'm curious what you think. Am I wrong about that, or?
No, I mean, of course, in 1948 was the same, Israel was created in 1948. It was the same year there was the partition of India and Pakistan. How many people? 2 million people died sorting that shit out. Are we having a web stream on that? Does anyone care? I don't think so. I mean, even if you bring it up, people don't even know. And, and it's interesting to me that like probably the most anti-Israel and anti-Semitic country in the world is Pakistan. And I mean, you see it online. It's really crazy. And it's like, man, do these people have any awareness whatsoever of what is going on in their country? And, I mean, I think everything is taken out of, is just completely blown out of proportion when it comes to Israel. There's a kind of easy answer as to why I think that might be. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I think mostly it has to do with just people getting bad history.
Well, this also, I think, relates to the conversation of China, where much like you would have people who are against Israel, and I also see that as kind of being a fuck you dad move on part of a lot of people who are on the right, because again, throughout history, they would look at like Gio, you have a father who was very pro-Israel, and
don't remind me.
And he also wants to debate you on the subject of Israel for an upcoming Patreon-only episode. But
really?
Yeah. No, he's great. And
I'll be merciful.
and I do think that there is this generational divide where I think Gio's generation sees people of that generation as just being, hook, line, and sinker, whatever things, the Reaganite conservatives were telling them. But at the same time, I think, like, it is one thing to question a paradigm of the past, but it's almost like you question the paradigm of the past, and then you stop, and you say, okay, I'm satisfied with knowing everything I know currently. I know enough to make a judgment call on these things. But I think there's a similar thing going on with China. So there was a certain Twitter user, and Gio, you know who I'm talking about here, who recently posted a clip, well, not a clip, he posted a link to the stream, which is great advertising, but he posted a link to a stream that we had where we were talking about China, and one of the people who was in the conversation, and also a person who was attached to the conversation, Thomas Sowell, which I think you know Thomas, right? Thomas Sauer. No, well, he worked for.
Oh, Tom Sauer.
Yeah. So this dude basically said that Tom Sauer and the rest of the people who I had on there who were supporting the, being against the Chinese government, that they were, three-letter agency people, that they were intel people who were feeding us anti-China propaganda, because this guy is a big fan. The CIA
hates the Chinese, hates Xi Jinping.
Yes, that's the other paradigm that's currently happening right now.
But I know, okay, Lev, I know you're subtweeting Logo, and I mean, he did say some mean things about us, but I mean, he's coming on again. But
didn't he say something about this is the guy who was going after Claremont?
Oh yes, he probably has gone after Claremont. He goes after everybody. He says that Claremont is also a front for pushing anti-Chinese propaganda. Something, I mean, he's big into Xi Jinping or something. I mean, I think a lot of people within the intelligence agency, I think, have directly targeted Claremont people. So I don't know about, I mean, they're certainly pissed off at people like Michael Anton.
But why does he like China so much, Gio?
I don't know. We could ask him that, but I think I wanted to, let's not focus on Logo. Let's focus on David. What do you think about the Chinese situation in terms of the American intelligence agency? Do you think that some people have a sympathy towards Xi Jinping? Like the whole China Joe Biden, things like that? Or do you think that there is a geopolitical antagonism, that America obviously sees China as a threat? I mean, my country in Canada, we're pretty much owned by the Chinese. So it's, I'm totally blackpilled on that issue.
Right.
But what do you think in terms of the American state, in terms of their relationship to China? Is the China Joe thing just like a total like a misnomer, or do you think there's
no, look, I mean, it goes back to, I mean, the first time I really noticed it was Thomas Friedman when he was writing a couple of those columns years ago, decades ago now, where he's just like, you know what? It's pretty efficient. This is a pretty decent way to run a government. And prior to that
I remember
time,
those.
Prior to that time, I always assumed that it was just a bunch of people getting rich. Like what's her face, Feinstein, and Richard Blum and all these people. I mean, do you think Feinstein and Blum really have sympathy for the, for the way, for the kind of the Chinese system, to the extent that it's sort of beyond them getting personally wealthy? I don't think so. I mean, I don't know, could be, but I doubt it. I doubt they think very much about anything aside from their bank accounts.
That's true.
But it was when I first saw the Friedman thing that I thought, okay, there's, like I see the lens with which there can be like a pro-China sentiment from the left or from the establishment elite class, which is that, hey, we're getting rid of the point of view of the rabble. And, it's just whatever, we can make I mean, this was always the thing with the Soviet Union that attracted the leftists, which was, here's a 5-year plan. Like, oh my God, we're going to be the ones who come up with the 5-year plan. And, as a bonus, we don't have to listen to the rabble, object to it. So we have, carte blanche to do what we want, which is, as we know, like over the last, couple of hundred years, like the desire to remake society and to control society, and remake it in your image, it's a really, really strong human impulse.
Right.
So it's probably a mix. But as far as like the CIA, I mean, I have no idea what they're thinking. I have a feeling that it's probably a mixed bag in there right now when it comes to it, because the Russia analysis people inside, like it's sort of, in a way, it's sort of easy to, like, there's been a tradition of like bullshit ideological political screens that have been laid over across our relationship with Russia and Europe and the Middle East. And China, honestly, as well, like, I'm not familiar with the different layers of bullshit that kind of have gone on top of China. I'm assuming, maybe wrongly, but I'm assuming that there are a couple of folks in there who are legit China people, who are skeptics. China skeptics. But I mean, as of now, it's like, if you're in big business at all, at some point you are getting paid through that relationship, whether it's manufacture of goods or selling goods or what have you. At some point you're getting rich doing that. So there's that incentive to not rock the boat.
Yes.
But as far as people who see it as a legitimate system that's actually a lot better than the United States, I'm just curious. Again, I don't want to pick on Logo here, but in general, somebody who would think that, would there be any devil's advocate position at all that could be taken with them? Are we possibly misinformed about some of the things that we're seeing related to China and how bad it is? Or no?
I don't think so. I think the Chinese system is very specific to the Chinese people.
Yes, that is true. Yes, that is true.
And it's like, hey, okay, I admire the Chinese system, I want to do it here. Well, it's not going to go.
But there are people like for example, the social credit thing that could imagine a woke social credit system.
Right. No, you don't have to imagine. I mean, that's what they want. 100%. No. I mean, without question. I wasn't talking about elements of that regime. I was talking about like
in toto,
the totality of that regime. Elements of it for sure. I mean, they look at that and they say, "Oh man, we want that."
But it can never work in. You don't think it could ever work in America?
Oh,
like
no. I think that
planning.
can work. I think that can work in America. I think what can't work is, I mean, one of the great things, and I'm not a China guy, but just as a as a kind of outside observer, amateur, China watcher, I could just say that like, China again is an issue of scale.
Yeah,
it's totally an issue of scale. You take the Chinese system and you try to lay it on top of Vietnam, and you're not going to get it. It's not going to work, which is actually what ended up happening.
Yeah.
But yet they are going into Africa and different places around the world. And the question for me is, under Chinese hegemony, what is going to happen to a lot of these places? Like,
nothing good.
Nothing good. And people, I mean, people are like, oh, American imperialism and blah, 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 blah. Okay, just watch and wait and see what Chinese imperialism looks like.
But I guess the argument would be that that's more of an honest imperialism, whereas America inflicts their cultural disease and they're moralizing upon the world and
hold on. That was not always the case.
Oh, it's true. If you look back, for example, the Philippines, that was pretty overt.
Okay, yeah, but I mean, it's not necessarily, totally decadent. It's not necessarily all of these things.
Look at Korea post-Korean War.
Have to be.
South Korea, I mean, the American people, the soldiers there, they brought in a lot of educational resources for the Koreans, and I'm sure they're very grateful for that whole experience. Right.
Like, I mean, there's this whole idea that, I mean, this is what happens when we sort of get too enthusiastic about revisionism, which is we get into, like, some people get into Cold War revisionism, which, they're like, oh, well, the CIA is so bad. They did all these things. Look at the Cold War, da, 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 da. And like the word that's conveniently left out of that analysis is KGB. And, and the context of the Cold War. And it's like, I'm sorry if your wokeness or baseness or what have you has gotten you over to the point where you're saying, no, in fact, the U.S. was the U.S. was the bad guy in the Cold War. I think you need to reevaluate your.
But kind of, though. I mean, they were taking up the. I know Lev is going to say, well, because you read Alexander Dugin, that's why you say this. But I think the U.S. was taking up this sort of Anglo establishment of controlling various aspects of the world with their foreign policy. I don't think. I'm not like obviously a Chomsky.
As the Soviets were trying to do.
Oh,
and
obviously.
And as opposed to who in the history of empires in the world did not do similar things? The question is, what are we comparing the United States to?
But America's in denial of its own empire status. That's the problem. America lies to you about how it's an empire among others. It likes to claim that this is just the natural conclusion of post-Cold War liberalism.
Okay. Well, so So that's another. I mean, that's another point. That is a good one, which is that we, the Cold War, the end of the Cold War really fucked us up.
Yes.
Because we learned a bunch of lessons that were not actually true. And I think the kind of current period that we're going through, specifically with Trump and the kind of whatever this particular fraught period is now that we're going through, is we're trying to deal with some of those lessons that we learned that ended up being false.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And by the way, speaking of the KGB, I said it on one podcast before, during the reign of my brain is completely fried right now. The last Soviet Gorbachev. During Gorbachev's reign, he got rid of the.
Lev, how could you forget that?
Sorry, he got rid of the.
You were born in the Soviet Union.
Yes, I'm aware.
Holy
he
crap.
got rid of the KPSS, as they call it, the Communist Party of Russia. But what still remained was the KGB. The KGB never went away. He never got rid of them, and that was the biggest problem, because those were the people who later on ended up saving the skin of Boris Yeltsin, because Boris Yeltsin stole a lot from the Russian people. I mean, as did Putin. But the point here is that Putin ended up helping him out by basically giving him full immunity from whichever crimes he did. His family owns several airports in Russia right now. The Yeltsin family, so they're still pretty active.
But people claim that Yeltsin was like a CIA front, that he was being propped up by the Americans, or do you think that's not?
I have not heard that. All that I can say is that while Yeltsin was in power, Putin was able to get away with a lot of things in Russia. So this idea that people, the logo, have about Putin coming into Russia and clearing out all the corruption, it's absolute drivel, because he was the corruption. No, but what's there to disagree about where people have come out and talked about how he used to deal drugs when he was the deputy mayor in Russia from the harbor there, and how he used to get all this foreign aid, never give it to the Russian people themselves, but basically sell it out and make a lot of money from that. So he was an absolute scumbag, and he was an absolute leech on the Russian people.
The question is, what about Putin now? Like, what do you think after the whole like disastrous like Russiagate nonsense? Like David, what do you think about how Putin approaches the quote unquote American empire as it stands now? I mean, irregardless of his crimes in the past.
Oh, look, I mean, I honestly don't know. I'll tell you about the Trump Russia thing for sure. Not for sure. But I'm making a conjecture at least as well founded as anything that was made, by, let's say, the mainstream for the last 5 years, which is that in propagating the conspiracy theory that Trump was, beholden to Russia, the Democrats knew, at least the smarter ones, had an idea that they were potentially playing with fire in terms of the U.S.-Russia relationship. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think there had to have been some type of very quiet, maybe secret communication between top Democrats and the Kremlin, saying, "Hey, this is just for domestic consumption. Don't mind us."
Interesting.
Because otherwise, they could have gotten into a serious problem here. And the Russians absolutely, all foreign leaders are very enthusiastic consumers of American media. And it's like, I mean, you're cruising for a bruising in terms of that relationship if you're not going to address it head on. And I definitely think something was addressed. And, first day that Biden came into office, we had him shut down the Keystone Pipeline.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And I think the two things are interlinked. And
that really was the fault of the fucking idiot we have running our country too, as well. I'm just going to put that out there, but yes, go ahead.
Look, I mean, a scenario where a top reasonable Democrat, and you know what, those people still exist somewhere. I'm not saying you've ever heard their names, but let's say someone like a Leon Panetta,
maybe a Kucinich, maybe, or
no. It would be a Leon Panetta who would go over and, who's got contacts up and down, the Kremlin from his years in government, could go and say, just let everybody know that this is just an op to get rid of Trump. Don't take anything seriously. Because if you listen to some of the stuff that they were saying, I mean, the Russians had reason to get on war footing, with the amount of hysteria that you had in the United States. I mean, you could have gotten into a really, really dangerous situation. So the fact that did not happen, leads me to believe that that's where the smart money is. I can't see realistically, I can't see a scenario where that didn't happen. And, of course, that's unbelievably, a situation like that is unbelievably cynical, but also of course, what does it do is it sets the Democrats up for big, giant compromise. Because that conversation, the existence of that conversation or that communication or whatever, will be held over American Democrats for for God knows how long.
That it was all kayfabe, yeah.
That it was all fake. I mean, imagine having a some communication from Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton saying, yeah, we know this is all bullshit, but we're just this is all for our domestic idiots. I mean, imagine if that got out. Though, you know what? We're in such a screwed up situation, it probably wouldn't make a difference anyway.
No, I think it wouldn't. Yeah,
but just to push back a little bit with the Trump situation, it wasn't great optics, you gotta admit, when we had Trump and Putin talking without any interpreters for a pretty long time. Just as it is, like for the people.
Oh, it was terrible optics. Yeah, no, it was terrible optics. It was a stupid thing to do if you're if you're trying to tamp down on that, for sure.
So that's why I don't really understand. Like, people look at well, I guess if you're in the desert, even a drop of water. I mean, you're speaking of water. That is a mighty fine container you got there. Yeah. But even a drop of water, which I guess Trump represented to a lot of people, would be enough if the kind of people that they're seeing everywhere don't really hold up to snuff certain ideals that people would imagine people had back then with not FDR, but Teddy Roosevelt and other people that you would look at as being very virile and powerful and people who could set things straight. You imagine that scene of somebody assassinating with the bullet Teddy Roosevelt, and him still with the bullet inside of him finishing the speech. While with somebody like Trump, I'm not sure if he'd do that or if he'd put Melania in front when the bullet's flying. I mean, look, I'll give credit where credit's due to any politician that does things that help out the situation, but we may still be missing that kind of energy, not even in terms of a president, but like you said in the very beginning, what the founding fathers intended, for there to be a certain quality of virtue in most of the people that are going to be taking part in society in the first place. And so I guess my last question to you, and I really appreciate you being here, spending time with us. This is an amazing conversation. My last question would be, what do you think it would take to resuscitate that kind of virtue in maybe not the entirety of America, but at least in certain smaller circles here and there that will be able to communicate to each other thanks to the internet?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's the point. The point is to concentrate on local autonomy and to reorient people's, let's say, political ambitions towards the local and away from the national. The national has a way of taking the imagination and keeping you on a hamster wheel, for lack of a better word, where you're just concerned about what happens in Congress, or as soon as one election ends, you're talking about the next election for president, for Senate, for House. None of this matters as much as the local stuff. And if you can put together local groups and people within your immediate geographic area who will do the things that that are important to sustain you and your family. For example, when it comes to the COVID stuff, I mean, that's really a local issue. We saw it here in Florida. We saw towns that town by town. I mean, here. It was town by town. The COVID rules were different, and that tells you that this shit makes a difference. And a lot of people who are apolitical were kind of red pilled during COVID because they realized that there is a difference between politicians on the left and right. Or there could be, let's say, there could be a difference between politicians on the left and right. When it comes to how they address some of these issues that they just kind of took for granted or weren't interested in. They're like, okay, I don't care about tax policy, but is my gym open? Or is it closed? Am I going to go through another lockdown? I mean, these things matter, and the political party or the ideology of the politicians often, determine how things go. That's what I would do. I would also pick up and move. If you're in a blue area, pick up and move to be in a red area. Life is too short to be surrounded by people who hate your guts.
Yeah.
the minute you move, I've got a lot of friends in blue cities, and they look around, they feel like they're under siege. I've spent most of my life in blue cities. I lived in San Francisco, I lived in New York City, I lived in Washington, D.C., I lived in Austin. Um, I mean, this is a kind of mixed area where I'm in. This is yeah, this is a kind of mixed area. I've never been in a totally red place, but I'll tell you, once you leave, Brooklyn, or you leave Fairfax County, Virginia, or something like that, you can breathe freer. Your entire, your entire mood changes. Literally, your entire mood changes, and it is meaningful to be surrounded by people who share your values, share your way of looking at things.
Exactly.
And that's where people should start. And I think even before you have grand ideas about remaking the country or doing anything, like, get that shit sorted. Get the local thing sorted, and move to a place where where you're happy, where the expenses aren't that high. It's an easy quality of life. Maybe the weather is better. All of these things, just do it. You will increase the optimism and happiness in your life greatly.
And lastly, do you have any predictions for some of the blue states that have rich people in them? Like, one of the states for the highest quality of life is still, I believe, Maine, regardless of any of the policies there. So when it comes to places like, maybe not Maine, but places like New York, for example, where there are rich people living in certain areas, at what point do you think it's going to be, like, this close to their nose, the amount of trouble that's occurring, that they're not going to be able to pretend anymore, then they eventually start voting in people that would do something about the crime and other situations that they're ignoring right now like a bunch of ostriches?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think New York and I mean, as you know, New York and Maine are totally different.
Yeah.
I mean, Maine is completely white, and compared to New York, very sparsely populated, and they could afford to indulge, they could afford to indulge in voting for politicians who are going to say, dumb shit that at the end of the day isn't going to, change their lifestyle very much. They're not having an influx of, migrant workers from Guatemala being flown in by the U.S. military. Into their communities. So they really don't care. It's cost free for them. They can go on indefinitely. New York, on the other hand, too, I think it can go on just about indefinitely, because the city has changed completely. The city that elected Rudy Giuliani is a completely different one than exists today.
Yeah.
In that city, at that time, you still had a middle class, and that's really the key. And that's also it's the same with San Francisco, and with other blue cities. You no longer have a middle class at all in a lot of these places.
But wouldn't the rich people start minding the fact that there's rampant homelessness and crazy people going out stabbing people on the streets?
Yeah, that's the one thing that eventually I think is gonna change. Is you will maybe get. I mean, you're not gonna get a law and order guy, but you'll get someone that passes for a law and order guy in New York or in San Francisco. Probably, but it's not going to fix. It's not. I mean, look what happens when there is law and order. The prices skyrocket. The prices in these places skyrocket. There's nothing arresting the trend line in these cities, which is just. I mean, it's a playground for the rich, and it's it's a playground for the rich as they try to pacify, the very, very, very poor.
Yeah,
wow.
It's true.
Well, hopefully something will happen there.
Also,
yeah, we got to go to super chats as well.
Oh yeah, but lastly, I guess, God, I really should just move out of here. They're gonna give the fucking guy a majority in
Move in with me, Gio.
in October. Yeah, I mean,
why do people stay in Canada? I don't understand.
Yeah,
I really don't understand.
Yeah, it's terrible. Just the restrictions, we've never left, and where Ontario is run by a fat R word. Anyways, I wanted to ask you finally about I guess more of a classic question, going from like because we started off the conversation about global Islam. Do you think that the things have sort of changed significantly since, let's say, when Mark Stein wrote America Alone? Do you think that the sort of Huntington-esque like war of civilizations, is that still a thing? And what is Islam's role in the future? Or do you think like the global neoliberal order is just going to crush all local cultures and differences, and that even Islam will get put under the boot of glorious gay automated luxury neoliberalism?
Right. It's a great question. It's a really, really great question. I have to actually think it out. I mean, I read America Alone when it came out.
Me too. I was like 14 years old. Yeah.
Yeah. I was a little older, but still, you know. I was living in San Francisco, and working at the time and doing temp gigs in law firms, and playing music and whatever. But
nice.
Yeah. So. I mean, I think that Huntington was right, and Huntington's work I'm, very familiar with, going back to a really hip ninth grade honors history teacher who was like, that book had just come out, and she was like, hey, this is really interesting. We talked about it. And now, I mean, today, she'd be expelled. She'd be she should be put in jail for bringing Huntington into it. But Huntington was he formed the basis, the lens through which we discussed world history at that time.
Yeah.
But I think it's it's very true, and I have a lot of kind of sympathy for that argument. But on the other hand, it's like, this is a different civilization that we're contending with.
Right.
The woke civilization is a different one that we're contending with, and putting it in the box of like, this is the West, this is the West at its fulfillment, or this is America or liberalism at its fulfillment, at its natural place. We could argue about that for forever. But I think we all agree that it is some kind of a force that, probably, I'm sure Huntington himself would agree, and Stein would agree that it is, let's say, it's an alternate civilization.
Stein does actually agree. I've heard him. Yeah. And also, before Super Chats, I wanted to ask you, I was thinking about this at the beginning. You mentioned in Alex Kashuta's interview, you said that a lot of people, like the sort of diehard constitutionalists, like the people that have made up the paleo side of American intellectualism on the right, they love reading about various empires, especially the Roman Empire. But then you said, well, that can't happen here because America is different. Now, how come you're very skeptical of the way?
I was actually talking about the neocons in that.
The Straussian. But do you think? Yeah, sorry, not the Paleocons. Oh, God forbid. I'm more of a Paleocon.
Not the Straussians, the neocons.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There's some people that claim that, but what do you think? How come you haven't been excommunicated from the Claremont Institute? Because it seems that you're more skeptical of the American project, and like, how do you square away like this sort of an emphatic like enthusiasm for the foundations of the American project and in the Claremont Institute, whereas you are more of a voice that has cautionary skepticism of the direction in which the American project is going? Like, I don't mean to problematize of course I don't mean
no. I think we're all on the same page. I don't think anybody thinks that there are two different things. There's the America of the founding, and there's the America that we find ourselves in now.
Yeah.
And everyone at Claremont, without any exception, is fully alarmed at what's at the, let's say, the crisis of the current American regime.
Yes.
Up and down. So I don't think it's a I'm not, it's not that I'm skeptical of democracy is a concept. It's just a concept. We have more information. We need more information before we can make a judgment. About in what particular place, where, and when. But yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of the founding. I think the founding was kind of close to divine. I think America as founded was a wonderful kind of revolutionary experiment in founding, in founding a people within certain principles. I mean, I think it's very clear that we're no longer that people. So, right. So that's the issue. And the issue is, what do we do now? I mean, for a long time at Claremont and at other places, the issue was, okay, how do we get back to that?
Right.
I think that as time goes on, more of us are waking up to the fact that getting back to that is not in the cards.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we would need another 3 hours to talk about my disagreement of characterizing the American founding as divine, but I mean,
well, we'd have to.
Well, I'm an agnostic / atheist, so when I say it, it's a little, it's a bit,
But you don't.
Well, they did worship in a way the Roman gods. They had like the whole pantheon.
Well, there are people that say that they were Masons and there was nefarious post-Enlightenment.
Well, some were Masons, but that doesn't make it nefarious. It's just a tool. A lot of these things are just tools.
Yeah.
Sure, but but what's I mean, those terrible Masons, those terrible secret societies. We know that there are no secret societies. I don't know, in Russia. Like, of course there are.
Oh yeah,
this is a problem. Yeah, I mean, this is a kind of fact of life in any civilization.
Even like Bronze Age pervert says that, like Alex Jones, he harps too much on the old families. Like it's more nuanced nowadays. Like I think there's certainly secret societies, but I mean, let's say the quote unquote bugman that run these civilizations, I don't think all of them are skull and bones men. They're not all like, the stereotype of the wasp.
I think that's obvious. Yeah.
Well, even with the skull and bones, I can't imagine today there being like a woke skull and bones. What, they're not doing like the jacking in the coffin anymore? Like how could skull and bones even exist today? It's very strange to me.
Well, they probably do, but I mean,
look, a lot of people want explanations for why the world is the way it is, and it makes and it's so comfortable to find an explanation that you think unifies all of these different things. And I mean, when you're doing analysis, that's sort of should be your first. When you find that everything is connected, that's probably your first clue that you've screwed up somewhere in your analysis. Not everything is connected, and there's a range of reasons for why people do the things that they do. I mean, this is something that I mean, what drives me crazy about a lot of conspiracy theory thinking is that in many ways it does prevent you from thinking, and it prevents you from seeing that people actually have opinions about, it's not necessarily like nefarious in the sense that people wake up and they say, I want to do evil.
You're right. Yeah.
People have interests, and people don't even understand their interests. So this is the thing. This is actually a thing that I thought maybe we would end up getting to or talking about.
Yeah.
But like, you've had this thing where people are like, what do you call it? Like CRT is anti-white. No, CRT is not anti-white. Don't say that, because blah 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 blah. What's motivating? I mean, all these, I think it's completely irrelevant. Like, obviously, yes, CRT is anti-white.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously,
yeah, I mean,
right? But the point of view is, what the point I'm making is that you've got a lot of different people who are pushing the CRT narrative, who are coming at it for different reasons, right?
Right.
So on one hand, you have the people who are like ideologically fixated, ideologically, whatever, they're hardcore leftists. Okay, that's one screen. Then you've got people who, whatever, they're resentful, they hate white people. That's another
Ibram X. Kendis of the world. Yeah.
Right. Or like Kendi also, you've got an overlay of what do you call it? Of just just money making corruption there.
Grifting.
Grifting, right? Yeah. So you've got that layer of things. So I mean, at the end of the day, it's all of these things, in different combinations. So even having the argument is to me is silly. Like, it's the same thing with the Brotherhood, right? It's the same thing with them when it comes to, for example, there are people who want, who are like, in that movement, in that thing, they're primarily focused on their hatred of Jews in a Quranic way.
Right.
Okay. There are people who are obsessed with their hatred of Israel in like a, sort of left-wing anti-imperialist way.
Yeah, and then there's white nationalists.
There are people, right, and it's all this stuff, and everybody's coming at it for a different reason. So that's why assuming that someone who has a particular politics even knows, or he has even thought deeply about a particular point of ideology or philosophy, I think is assuming too much.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like what I remember Bap said this once. He goes, the people like these Chomskyites that say that in the 60s and 70s, the CIA manufactured all reality. The CIA put in all these fascist dictators. The CIA, in fact, has manufactured. They're manufacturing this call right now. The CIA.
Yes, exactly.
They're yeah.
Yeah. Look, there's also a temptation too when you spend your life concentrated on one particular enemy. Mm-hmm. And I saw this all the time with people who are like Brotherhood. Yes, we're obsessed with the Brotherhood. You end up seeing the Brotherhood behind every corner.
Yeah.
And you end up thinking that they are 10 feet tall. And I know a lot of people who were kind of, who got hoodwinked by this. Who else got hoodwinked by this? But the fucking Russia hawks, where it's like, okay, I was a Russia hawk. I was, I'm skeptical of Putin and that regime. Okay. But man, what they did with Trump Russia was completely crazy. And I'm here to tell you, honestly, I know some of these people going back, decades.
Oh God.
They fully believed it.
The David Frums and the Bill Kristol.
They fully believe it. It's not like, okay, we're lying here, wink, wink. They fully believed it. And this was a thing that freaked me out too, because I saw that it's like, I'm sorry. We need people who are legit. We need people who have a legitimate understanding of the national security threats, or really of anything. Who are supposed to be the serious people in the room. And when the serious people in the room go batshit crazy, and fall for stuff that's transparent nonsense, that's when you look around and you say, "Oh my God, what's happened?" Because
even look at like, as much as I disagree with some ideological aspects of the sort of Americanism that Claremont, I know, Lev, I know, Dugan, right? But I do think that Claremont is a cut above. Really, I mean, it's no comparison. I mean, just look at the transition that Trump has brought in terms of how the neocons are fitting in with the neoliberals. I mean, look at the fucking Lincoln Project, like those worms. I mean, just look at what they're putting out, and
it makes it that much
really
harder.
Yeah,
it really makes my mission a lot harder in making a case against Russia when we do have stuff like that coming out of the woodwork. These are not the best people. And I'd say the same criticism for a lot of the people who run a lot of these blue states. They look like, okay, sure, maybe they've been clever enough to get to the positions they're in, but they look to me like they're devoid of life.
But have they, look who's the mayor of Chicago there?
Oh, God.
Lightfoot? Oh, God. Yeah. Come on.
Very light on her feet. Very light on her feet.
No, but it's just, I think like they're, like, do you think, like, before we get to super chats, do you think the sort of, what's the word that Spandra calls it, Lev? Bio-Leninism. Do you think that, like, there will ever be a limit to the incompetence of these people within the regime itself, or do you think that entropy will inevitably crash and there will be like a reckoning, or do you think that they can limp along for quite a while with the sort of incompetence and the disastrous narratives that they're inflicting on us?
Oh, Lev? I thought it was
no, you
yeah.
David. Yeah.
Oh, that's really a question. I mean, I don't know. That's a good one. I tend to think that at some point there's just going to be a collapse because it can't go on indefinitely.
Right.
I mean, you already see, like, okay, hey, we want to shoot a rocket into space. You know, you can't do that with, affirmative action hires.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, somebody is going, at the end of the day.
Well, there was this one black woman, she created all of the space program. She didn't just crunch a few numbers. She created all the space program. So it's like they're doing this revisionist thing.
Right. But it's not even a matter of like, by race anymore. It's like race and then whatever. I don't even know what you can say on YouTube anymore, but like, whatever. So that's where we are. And I don't, the CIA, yes, I've got I've got, a bunch of, mental disorders and blah, blah, blah. Yes, I work for the CIA. How long can that go on? That can't go on. That can't go on indefinitely.
I almost pray that is something that they're just putting on the front stage in order to, like I always say, like, give baby a pacifier. Dude, and like behind the scenes, it's
that I wish that was true. But at the end of the day, like, there's like, why would it be that way on one hand, and then on the other hand you have all of these other
so they can placate all these wokies.
But they're true believers. I disagree. I think they're true believers.
I think they're true believers. Who was the one that someone said, I don't know who to credit, someone was like, all these conservatives laughed for years about these kids getting degrees in gender studies, they won't be able to find jobs. And at the end of the day, they had their last
Welcome
laugh.
to the real world.
Right. They had their last laugh when, like, you need a gender studies degree to get a job.
Yeah.
And that's what it's come to.
Well, maybe our only hope is the theoretical breakaway civilization that may or may not exist. So we'll see what happens there.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Hashtag Operation High Jump. Research it. But
oh shit. Okay.
Yes. No, it's a very fascinating story. I don't know how true it is, but there's a lot of different things.
Oh
that
God,
come out.
No, don't go into.
Okay. I'm not gonna get into it right now. But basically,
it involves aliens.
Yes, it's very interesting. But anyway, super chat time. Super Iron Bob, $5. The limits of presidential power have not been truly tested. Some founders understood him as a temporary king with all the power that would entail. Is that the case? I don't know. Like, David, would you agree with that statement?
Sorry, can you say it again?
The limits of presidential power have not been truly tested. Some founders understood.
I think for sure FDR tested it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, again, it's not the regime of the founders in any way at all, but at the end of the day, who tests it is the political process tests it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And next one we have, thank you, just $4, no comment, thank you so much, thank you. Minotaur, $5. David, if given the chance, would you Batista bomb Geo through a table and or ladder?
And or a ladder? I don't know how to do it through a ladder. I could do it through a table, but I couldn't do it through a ladder.
All right. Well,
I saw it one time, but like where like Jeff Hardy like wung his. I think the ladder was fixed though. It looked like there was wood under the silver paint, but I remember there was quite a few. The little aluminum ladders they get. Yeah.
Well, hopefully
that would look pretty cool, actually. Too.
Hopefully, we can test it out on the BTR IRL stream in Florida in the near future.
Oh, God.
So next we have Super Iron Bob. This is the last one. $5. Our system is now adjudication. We need people brave enough to go Jacksonian. Courts made the decision. Now let them enforce it like the left.
Yes.
Well, there we go. Super Iron Bob.
Yeah.
He is our great patron contributor. He's the best. He's a $50 patron, by the way, if you would believe it. We have wonderful patrons. They keep us going, and so will you when you support BTR, when you become a patron.
Well, here comes the pitch.
Yes, it is all up to you. And by the way, this over here, this tweet, I'm just posting it once again for the people who haven't seen it. Let's say, is it going to move? No, it's not going to move. But anyway, this is the definitely legit magnet over here. Isn't this a beautiful dog? By the way, this collie dog, definitely. This dog's name is definitely legit, by the way, David.
He was a friend of ours on Twitter, but he disappeared.
Yeah, nobody knows where he went to now. But anyway, that is $20. $5, you get access to the Discord. You get MP3 files of the episodes after they come out here in the stream. You get also exclusive Patreon-only episodes, which we are going to be doing really soon. Once more, you are going to get, once again, for $20, the magnets created by my father, Alexander Polyakov, genius artist. $30 is going to give you a beautiful print from Giovanni Pennacchietti from the TFW No GF series. Let's see, I'm going to open that right now as well. Let me see if I can find it here. There's too many things that I have on the screen. Here we go, Patreon print. I know, David, you don't see it in action, but the audience does, and it is a truly beautiful print. Gio, if you could post in the chat another example of the prints for David to see.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yes, because Gio, I don't know if you noticed, David, Gio is a wonderful artist, and he makes prints, paintings, all kinds of stuff.
That's great.
Yeah. Let me specifically find the series, though.
Yes. And for $50, you are going to get all of the above, plus the Warhammer 40k figure from Jules P. Hamilton, painted by him. You are also going to get another painting from Geo, from the Bob Ross style. You are also going to get another magnet, and this time this wooden magnet is custom. Whatever you want, my father is going to create it for you, within limits, of course. You have to be reasonable. And yeah, that is pretty much the pitch for the Patreon, patreon.com/breaktherules. I'm going to post it in the chat. Once again, those who are considering becoming patrons but have not become patrons yet, you are going to make this move much higher, much faster than it ever can before. We bring all different people together. And David, I just want to say that there we go, this picture right here. I know if you could see these in the chat, in the box over here.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah.
There you go.
That's great.
This is the Wojak over here, and
yeah, there's 5 of them, and they're Wojaks. Yeah.
So to conclude, David, you were an absolutely phenomenal guest. I would love to have you back.
Thank you, appreciate it.
It's been amazing.
And with that being said, guys, please, let's see. As far as plugs go, obviously twitter.com. /David Reaboi. Yes, Substack time as well. So this is the Twitter and the Substack. You can go to davidreaboi.com, and that's going to link you to the Substack, appropriately named Late Republic Nonsense.
Are you working on anything currently for the Substack?
Yeah, I've got an amazing podcast that I did, a chat with Walter Kern.
Oh,
who was the novelist and the literary critic and essayist.
Yeah.
Great guy, based as hell. Very interesting. And
what do you talk about specifically?
Oh, we went everywhere. So we went to, we talked about cities and film noir and the national security surveillance state. And a bunch of other things. So I'm just kind of writing it up. I'm probably going to put it out tomorrow.
Nice. Oh, and before you go, I'm just curious, just out of this now, what would be like the top 3 books currently right now that you would recommend people to read so that they understand a little bit more about what is currently going on? And also any book on the founding of America as well that you would recommend?
obviously, I think the best thing that's been written about this subject in a while has been Anton's book, The Stakes. I think it's really fantastic. I would also, obviously read Angelo Codevilla, who is absolutely a national treasure. Unfortunately, his stuff is kind of everywhere. So you've got to go to Claremont Review of Books, and then you've got to go to American Greatness. It's primarily where he's writing. What else? Thomas West's book. I mean, if we want to get into sort of Claremont and philosophy of founding, Tom West's book, The Political Philosophy of the Founding, is a great one to read. What else? I mean, obviously the Caldwell book, Age of Enlightenment, probably everyone has read by now.
Yes.
Which is also fantastic. And Caldwell is just great. I mean, his book, Reflections on the Revolution in Europe, was amazing and really changed a lot of things for me when I first read it. What else? Just looking.
And everybody
my
subscribe.
problem is that I get so many of these books from friends who put out books, and a lot of them are so good, but it's just like I'm just totally overwhelmed.
Yeah,
I'm totally overwhelmed with this. I have a friend who suggested, and you probably have read, you've read the Neil Stephenson book, Christonomicon.
Oh, I almost finished it. I'm like, this, man, I'm gonna get hate from Jules right now for not finishing that book yet. But yes, I'm almost done with it, and it's a very interesting read.
Okay, yeah. So I've got that sitting here. I've got the other thing that I started to read that's amazing, and it's totally off of field, but it's David Byrne's book, How Music Works.
And you are a big jazz aficionado.
Yeah, but
nice.
I mean, this book in particular is aside from it being very well written, it makes you think about music in other ways, and it's really good, and I recommend that.
Excellent. Well, there we go. David, once again, thank you so much for being here,
yeah,
spending the time with us talking. Yes,
yeah.
This is a true honor. So
going to the gym.
Excellent. I was doing workouts right before the stream started, by the way. I did the pull-ups, and look, I know my arms are very thin right now, but look, something's starting to give a little bit.
Yeah, good. You know what you got to do? You got to eat more.
I know. I'm going to eat. Here, I'll show you what I'm going to eat. Look at this.
Oh, God.
Look at this.
It's going to turn mukbang stream now.
All right, look at this steak over here.
Excellent.
Nice, juicy steak over here.
Wait, you made that during the stream?
Yes, and I saved it, and then here it is. So I'm going to eat that. I'm going to eat that soon. So there we go. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every one of you. Don't forget to subscribe, like, leave a comment, share this stream around on Twitter. And it all helps. It all contributes to growing the conversation. And once again, David Reaboi. And Gio, any plugs you want to do? Real quick.
Oh, yeah. My YouTube channel, my Instagram, all the usual stuff. I'm going to work on my dramatic reading of the Book of Revelation. First episode drop. And I also did a great 3-hour interview with another YouTuber on the work of art and neoliberal kitsch and different things. That I'll link to in my link tree and Instagram and all that. So yeah, that's going to be good.
And also, since we're plugging, follow me on Twitter as well, twitter.com/LevPo, LEVPO. If you want
Sunday art stream.
Yes, well, this Sunday, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do it, but next Sunday we are going to be able to do it. And follow my YouTube, youtube.com/Lev Polyakov. Watch my animations. David, I don't know if you're a fan of animation or not, but I will send you some of my animations there. Only
Please
Love,
do.
I think you'll like that one. So anyway, guys, follow me there. Follow Gio, obviously. Follow David, and this is